Okay, hello. We're going to take a look at multiplication of fractions with the same denominator. Now, get ready for this. It actually doesn't matter what the denominator is. It doesn't have to be the same. But I like to kind of compartmentalize my learning. And so let's just say this is multiplication of fractions with the same denominator. And you're going to find out later it doesn't matter. But that's another video. Spoiler. So this is, I find, really mind-blowing. I struggle with math. I don't like this stuff. It is very confusing for me. But let's do this anyways. So here's what we do. Let me see if I've got another marker. Let me just make this super large so you guys can see. Hang on a second. So, oh, my blue is dead. Let's see if my green is alive. 2 out of 5 times, let's say 4 out of 5. Okay, let me just show you down with some green ink here. What I would do is I actually just simply multiply across. And what I mean by that, because I think you need to see an arrow that's going across, is I would go 5 times 5 to get an answer, and 5 times 5 is 25. I then multiply across. The top would be 4 times 2 to make 8. Okay, so if I were multiplying, what is 2 out of 5 multiplied by 4 out of 5? My answer would be 8 out of 25. Now, I'm going to show you later in another video how to simplify and how to make your fractions smaller, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is just how to complete the multiplication step, okay? When you have a really big fraction, it can be useful and useless at the same time. Let's say you're making a sandwich for like a 3-year-old and you cut the sandwich into 2. The 3-year-old might feel that the sandwich is now a smaller sandwich because you've cut it into 2, even though in theory it's just the same size sandwich. You could cut the sandwich into 8, and the 3-year-old might either be like, oh, there's more sandwich, or they might be like, there's less sandwich, just simply because you cut it into pieces. It doesn't mean that there's more or less sandwich based on how many pieces you cut it into. And so that's the same with fractions, is that when you multiply them, you're going to get a bigger number and like more sandwich cuts, but it's still the same amount of sandwich. It's the same value of sandwich, whether it's a larger fraction or it looks like it's out of a larger denominator or smaller denominator. So when we multiply, typically we multiply and then we try and reduce it. We try and simplify it and make it a fraction that is something that you can look at and instantly be like, I can picture how much that is worth. If someone said to you, oh, that's 17/25, it would take me a minute to be like, okay, let's picture 25 and fill in my mind 17 of those. But if somebody said a fraction that was like a third or a half or a quarter, I can be like, I know what that is. I can visually make sense of that. But again, I'm not showing you that in this step right now, but later on, after I show you how to multiply, you're going to want to then learn how to reduce it, how to simplify it, just so that the fraction is not so big. So let's take a look at what we do. And again, I'm telling you that this is the same denominator, but later on, it doesn't matter. But for today, it matters. So let's say I'm multiplying a half by a half. And I'm telling you right now, the answer is a quarter. And that feels really confusing because, let me show you why. As somebody who struggles with math, I find this really mind-blowing, and I'll show you why this is really confusing. So if I've got a half, and I'm filling this in, and I'm going to multiply it by this, I'm going to end up, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to end up with a quarter. I'll show you, let's look at the pictures after, but let me tell you why, right? Because we multiply the tops, we multiply across, we know that 1 times 1 is 1. So that's where my 1 comes from, right? 1 times 1 equals 1. I multiply across on the bottom. 2 times 2 is 4. So that's where my 4 comes from. That's why it's 1 out of 4. And if you struggle with math, you're probably looking at this thinking, this looks ridiculous. Why do I have this and this, and I use multiplication, which is supposed to make it bigger, and I end up with a smaller number? Let me explain why this is. A fraction is less than 1, right? Like, let's say you have a cookie. It's now not even a full cookie. It's less than a cookie. And if I said to you, how many groups of cookies would you have if you had like a bunch of pieces of cookies? You're not necessarily going to have a whole cookie just because you're putting together pieces. I need you to think of it like that. So it's quite possible that when you do multiplication, you're going to end up with a picture that looks smaller, even though you're thinking, but I'm multiplying. And this is way bigger than that. It's because you're saying, what is a half of a group multiplied by another half of a group? It's not what is a whole group multiplied by a whole group. Like, let me show you an analogy. Is, again, somebody that has always struggled with math, if I said, what is 1 times 1? In my mind, I want to say it's 2. I know it's not 2. It's 1. Because you're like, what is one group of 1? But you're sitting there thinking, but I've got 1 and another 1. Why don't I have 2? Like, so I can see why this would be really confusing. But if you only have one group, and in that one group, like, so think of a group as like a plate. On that plate, that's a group, you're putting in one thing. You only have one thing on the plate. Just because you have a plate doesn't mean you have 2 things on the plate. You just got one thing on the plate. So I need you to kind of warp your mind around that one, so that when you're filling this in and you're using the visuals, that might blow your mind a little bit. You might be like, whoa, I started off with more than I ended up with. That's because you're having like a half a plate with half a cookie. You're not going to end up with more plates or more cookies just because you did more multiplying. So let me show you how this works with thirds. This is where, again, I find this really challenging. So when we multiply, we multiply across. So 1 times 2, I've got, let's say, one group, and in it I'm placing 2. 1 times 2 is 2. So I'm going to put my 2 over here. I have to multiply across. 3 times 3 is 9. So already you're like, whoa, this circle's divided into 3. This circle's divided into 3. This circle is divided into 9. And that is a lot of slices. That's fine. Because later on, actually, no, whatever. We'll deal with simplifying and whatever later. But just know, so let's look at 1/3. Let's color this in because sometimes it helps. Maybe it might make it worse, but whatever. Let's just do it. We're going to color in this 1/3 over here. We're going to color in this 1/3 over here so that we end up with 2/3. But again, because I am multiplying something that is less than 1 by something else that is less than 1, it's still going to be less than 1. It's still going to be a really small number. Just because I'm multiplying doesn't always make it massive. It's sometimes multiplying makes the number look even smaller, right? So 2 out of 9, I'm going to fill in 2 little slices out of my 9. I pre-divided it into 9. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Good. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. My 2 little slices out of 9. I know this looks really weird. Trust me. I'm looking at this thinking this looks really weird. We just multiply the numbers on the bottom. That's our number here. We multiply the numbers on the top. That's our number here. So again, in the future, it doesn't matter if these 2 numbers are different. But today we're just going to say, imagine the numbers are the same. I've got 1/3. I'm multiplying it by 2/3. I'm not going to keep my number on the bottom the same like I did with addition and subtraction. Those were the good old days. This is now the harsh reality of multiplication. Is that now our answer has to be multiplied. We take the denominator, we multiply them, and we get it's out of 9. So, and then we take our numerators and we multiply them, and 2 times 1 is 2. So again, if my circle, let's say, I'm not going to draw this because I'm just going to go with like a bigger number here, and I don't really want to draw something super crazy. But let's say I've got 2 out of 5 times 3 out of 5. Okay, 2 out of 5 times 3 out of 5, I simply multiply across. So 2 times 3 equals 6. 5 times 5 equals 25. So my number is going to be 6 out of 25. And again, deal with like reducing and all of that stuff later. This is just the simple basic, how do you do multiplication of fractions with the same denominator. Let's do another example just because this is really hard. So let's go 3. I already had 4. Let's go 3 out of 6 times 4 out of 6. Okay, so 3 out of 6 times 4 out of 6, I multiply across. 3 times 4 is 12. There I've got my fraction line. 6 times 6 is 36. There's my fraction. And again, I would later on deal with trying to simplify that, make that number smaller, but that's multiplication of fractions. And especially fractions with the same denominator. We just, again, multiply the bottom numbers, we multiply the top numbers, and there we go. All right, good luck. I hope that helps.